Hey, this is Ben Llewellyn. In this video, I thought I would explain what the different countries are, or many of the different countries in the world are, in Welsh. And I'll get a bonus for you at the end when I've created a new name out of a country's name, because there are certain sounds that I try not to use when I'm speaking Welsh. So obviously when the Welsh language was developing names for different countries, much of the world was not explored yet. So let's start locally and expand out globally from there. So Cymru comes from Cymrogi, and there's three elements to that there. The bro bit means area, land, country, and the cum bit means together, like fellow compatriots, the same Latin root. And what's so cool about this word, it is a true Latin British fusion that gave birth to the name Cymru, which is Romano-British, and the I at the end, the GI, that's a plural ending. And this was the common term for the Welsh and the Welsh in northern England and southern Scotland. Oddly, this wasn't used for the Cornish and Breton, but all of these peoples refer to themselves as Brythoniaid, the Britons, and called each other that. And up until about the year 1200 or so, they called themselves Brythoniaid. They did use Cymru interchangeably between land and people in both cases, and there was no differentiation in spelling really. Until certainly circa 1580, they established a clear difference that the U, Cymru, means our fellow people's land, and Cymru with a Y means our fellow people, fellow Cymrogi. The people and the land arose out of the same root, and that makes this word Cymru quite special. It's interesting that the English word for Wales means foreigner, and that the Welsh word for Wales means our fellow people's land. It's quite a contrast. So over the border into England, Lloegr. And this is a very strange word because we're not in any agreement upon what it means. The only word that it's close to in structure really is llwgr, which means like a blemish, a defect, a corruption, which is quite vulgar in thought. But you have to remember these were most hated enemies at one point, so maybe. But also Lloegr has one characteristic, or England has one characteristic that makes it very unique amongst countries of the world from a Welsh perspective, and that's that it's masculine. Every other country is feminine. And I think what this is Lloegr evolved out of some type of llwgredd, a pollution-based word, as an insult, and it was attached to a masculine gender as a further insult to suggest that there's the blemish of a lack of fertility, which back in the day would have been deeply, deeply insulting. But that's what it is now, and it could actually mean from older Celtic laikos, meaning fighting warrior people. We don't know. The word for Scotland, Ralban, and you'll see that article in front of a lot of place names, okay? And this Alba is in Scots Gaelic as well, and quite a few Latin-based roots. What about Ireland? Iwerddon, and that werdd would suggest today to a speaker kind of a green element, but that's not what it comes from actually. The word for green, which is in feminine form gwerdd, came much later into Welsh, much later than the word Iwerddon. Iwerddon comes from Iwer, which became Iwerydd, and that means the Atlantic Ocean. Just a side note on Iwerydd, this came from Iwerdd, which is probably Proto-Indo-European for a sea of some kind. And the word for North Sea on the other side of the island in Welsh is Mor'ydd. And this is interesting because it might have the same root, an early form of sea, or it may mean some type of godly lord king. We're not sure, but Mor'ydd is North Sea, and Iwerydd is the Western Sea, the Atlantic. And a lot of people tend to think Iwerddon gave the name to the Atlantic Ocean, but I think it's the other way around. I think the Atlantic Ocean, Iwerydd, gave the name to Iwerddon, because the ON ending is a descriptive ending, and the EVE ending suggests that that's the name of a place. So you would expect it to be the other way around if Ireland gave the name to the Atlantic Ocean, Iwerydd. So in any case, Iwerddon is Ireland, and not to be confused with Jordanen. That's the name for Jordan. Jordanen and Iwerddon, very close. And Avon Jordanen is the river Jordan. Quite important considering biblical literature proliferates Welsh culture. What about Cornwall? Cernyw. Cernyw. And this is interesting because the word for a horn, corn. And that's where it comes from. The southwestern horn was, most of it at one point was Cernyw. And it slowly got pushed back to that final bit at the end, where Cornwall is today. Cernyw. Cernyw. It's key to remember that the British Isles are an archipelago. I mean, hundreds, thousands of islands exist. It just so happens that Britain and Ireland are so big compared to the rest of them. But there are some key islands that are useful to know. So look at this map. Ynys Heledd up here is the Hebrides. And Heledd is an interesting name because Heledd is almost like a mythological fertility nation woman. And Heledd was used for the Greek epic in Troy. And she was also used in native epics like Canichuiarchen to kind of really symbolize the loss of lands in England. And so it's quite interesting that this Helen of Troy figure in Welsh, Heledd, is the name of this island group further north. Also up north you have Ynys Erch, and Erch means dark and speckled. That's quite interesting. Ynys Erch. And then you have, going further south, you have Ynys Manaw, the Isle of Man. And this really echoes like Manawydan fab Llyr, a character from the Mabinogion, the traditional medieval Welsh tales, and who Llyr was his father. This, we are pretty sure, was the British equivalent of Poseidon, the sea god. And at a point in their history when the native British religion was flourishing before the Romans came in, this part of the world around the Irish Sea would have been a center point of their world. And the fact that this island in the middle of it is essentially Manawydan, the son of the sea god, is quite interesting, I think. Also further south you get the Isle of Guernsey, and this in Welsh is Ynys y Garn. And what garn is, it comes from carn, a funeral pile, a cairn over a mound or a gravesite. What about across the water in France? France is Frank. Frank. And you'll see this word quite often in Welsh over the centuries because French and France left a deep, deep influence upon Welsh culture. I would say much deeper than Irish or Scottish in the later periods anyway. And Brittany, another Brythonic speaking nation, Llydaw. Now there's kind of a legend that when they came over the water to Brittany, they cut out the tongues of people who did not speak their language in order to establish and keep the Breton language. I don't know if that's true or not, but Tau means quiet, be quiet. Llydaw. The French have had an influence upon Wales that is difficult to underestimate. And so we have a lot of names even for the regions of France in Welsh. So Burgundy, a Burgwyn. A Burgwyn. Gascony, a Guasquin. A Guasquin. And up in the north of Belgium, Flandres. This is really unique that we have a name for this, and there's a reason historically why. Because Sir Bembro, southern Pembrokeshire, the Flems from Flandres came over and settled there, and well, there was a forced removal of the native population. But we have a name for where they come from, Flandres. Glad Belg, the land, the country of Belg. And what it's describing there is the same thing that Belgium is, which is a Celtic people, the Belgi. So I like that we kept the Celtic origin of the people of Belgium. And one of my favorites is not a country anymore. I'll explain what I mean. Chichlin, this originally meant the kingdom that emerged out of the western fjords in western Norway. It specifically meant that kingdom, that region of the fjords. You can mean that today, and it gradually became to mean Norway, but it doesn't mean that anymore. It means more the fjord country. Norway is Norway, and then Chichlin-Dir, the land of Chichlin, is all of Scandinavia. So I like that we have our own word for the fjord country in Welsh, which does suggest that there was quite significant trade and commerce between them at one point. As you saw with Uralban, a lot of countries and place names attach the article or before. If it's a vowel, if it's a consonant. So there are some that do that, like Uralman. For any of you who speak French, I bet you know what this is. In French, l'Allemagne, Germany. And it's from that same Latin root in Welsh. One of my favorite words for a country in Welsh, Rheidol. Rheidol. Italy. Rheidol. Another one going even further south, Rift. What do you think this is? This is Egypt. And this is interesting because to me, there's this word Eif inside of it. Eif. Eife means he, she goes. He, she leaves. And to me that resonates with the Exodus in Hebrew legend from Egypt. The Jews leaving Egypt. And I wonder if there's some distant link here, connecting that word Eif, that moving element, with Eift and that Exodus from Egypt, because it's very similar. In any case, we don't know, but arrived is the word for Egypt. You get words which have the article, but they've been more and more dropped over time. You can add them if you want, and I hope that you do, because it's good to be a bit more formal and pompous, I think, with language. It keeps language more alive and structured, not to get washed away into another language. Agroig, Greece. And you can say Groig if you want. The article in that one's optional. Like India. You don't have to say you can say India. But why would you want to be exactly like English in each case anyway? So I say India. One that was definitely more formalized with the article in front of it, even part of the word, was Spain, which today is spine, unless you want to be a bit affected, which I like to, but you don't have to. And in literature, it's generally said as a spine. One word, a spine. But that's very old-fashioned, and I think it's dropped out of use. I hope you use it again, but let me know. Have you ever seen it? Probably not. A Swiss deer. Now you see that article at the beginning, it's optional in this one, I think. But I think this one's actually used more, a Swiss deer. And it means Switzerland, as you probably guessed from the flag. Going back to the Middle East, Lebanese. Lebanese. This is the word for Lebanon, and this is quite interesting because you would expect words that are old, that begin with L, to not begin with L. They would normally begin with K. And I wonder why this is not Lebanese. Normally that would be the case, and it suggests that there's some carry-on from biblical texts that kept it just as Lebanese. Probably. Lebanese. Israel. 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 And that initial accent on the is is very distinctive compared to the English Israel. You do hesitate before you finish the word. One that has been lost, which, oh, please bring this one back. Now the word today is Saudi Arabia, and I guess Arabia has been lost in English, but in Welsh it used to be Arabia. Arabia. I think it would be great if we could call it Arabia instead of Saudi Arabia, because we have ancient texts calling it that. What about moving further east? Now I do use this flag instead of the Chinese flag, of course, because I believe in basic human rights and liberty, right? But Shana. Shana. Now people do say Tsena, which I don't see why. It's just trying to be more English, but you will see this and people do use it, and that's perfectly fine. I say Shana, most people say Tsena. Shapan. Shapan. And I want to show you this sh here because a lot of names and places shift from J to sh, like John becomes Sean, Jenkins becomes Shenkin, that kind of thing. Shapan. So that's a nice one. That's one I like. What about the Americas? Well, I'm from Texas originally. I invented Texas, but people won't know what you mean if you use it, but you know, if you do use it, I won't be offended. But what about America? Reino Delathia, the United States. And it's interesting that this is not a direct translation of the word united. Unedig would be united, and it would usually come after Delathia, which has become Delathia here, states. Eno is more like joined into one, rather than united together. It suggests more of a kind of that melting pot and losing your identity idea. Eno, you become one, rather than you're united as if you are one but keeping yourself. That's what that in, which is one, then o is an adjective ending. And I would like to show a differentiation between the land of America and the state of America. In times before the end of the American Revolution and the war with Britain in 1812-1814, the main use of America in Welsh writing was Rymerig. And you still get this every once in a while, but it's not used often. I personally, when I'm speaking about the land rather than the state, I use Rymerig because this is in reference to not just America, but Canada and often the West Indies in Welsh poetry and writings historically. And I think having a name for the land, the soil, which is different from what it is in English, is important. At that, we have Rafrig for Africa, which I don't get why we don't use this anymore. It's not from English, and we should use this more because it makes us distinct. De Rafrig, South Africa. Back to the Americas, Ynysoedd y Wyddfa, the Virgin Islands. And what's subtly different about this from the English is the islands of the Virgin. Okay, and in English the is talking about both of those elements. But in Welsh, it's accentuating that this virgin is a specific character, more so. In South America, there is one that you do need to know. Arianin, Argentina. And this is because there has historically been a Welsh colony there, in Patagonia. It's common in Welsh culture for people to go down there and show credentials by having gone to Patagonia and come back and stuff. There's a cultural bond there, and it's part of being Welsh. So, and that Arian bit at the beginning, that means silver, but it also means money. So in French, l'argent, that means money and silver as well. And Welsh and French do have a few similarities like that, which are crossovers, like you saw with Germany. So I said at the beginning of this video that I had a bonus for you. I've got two countries that, well, I don't agree with just taking everything automatically from English, so I do change words sometimes to fit intentionally into Welsh grammatical rules. And in this case, I've taken Nigeria and Vietnam. So Nigeria, I don't tend to use the sound ja when I'm speaking Welsh. Some people do, some people want it, and some people include it as a letter in Welsh. In the alphabet, I don't. But, you know, it's however you want. But I don't think a place name, which is more formal, actually should have that, because to have more confidence means expanding over the world and making it yours in a way. So I took that concept of Iwerith with the Y-double-D, insinuating that it's a place, and I put Nisherith, because you don't want the hard G in Nigeria, and that would be a bit rude, so Nisherith. And you can look at that a couple ways. You could look at that as being Niger plus Rith. Rith is the word for free. Free Nigeria. Nisherith. Or Nisher, the place. Nisherith, as opposed to the river Niger. What about Vietnam? Well, beginning a word with the V sound, it doesn't always really fit. It seems a bit artificial. So to me, I just put gua at the beginning, like happens in a lot of words which took words from Latin. So Vietnam. I don't expect many to use those two, but in any case, I hope you enjoyed those words for the countries and that helped you with a bit of explanations. Let me know down in the comments, would you like more videos just explaining basic Welsh categories like that? And as always, diolch yn fawr am wylio. We'll see you in the next episode.